Welcome to Turning the Page, a Lexington Public Library podcast. I'm Miriam Adarat.
And I'm Erin West. If you love the library because of books, the programs, and the people behind both, then this is the podcast for you.
And even if you don't, there's still fun to be had. We will bring you the latest book releases that are worth checking out, figuratively and literally.
And we will discuss all of the happenings at the library to look out for.
And of course, what would a library podcast be without a special guest? We will get to know some special authors that are making an impact on our local literary scene.
Whether you're listening to us in your car while washing dishes or snuggled up with a warm drink, we are grateful for your time and hope you enjoy. So welcome back to Turning the Page. We have some exciting changes. We are welcoming Miriam to the show from Tales from the Kentucky Room.
Yeah,
Yes.
so thank you, Erin, for welcoming me on this podcast. Yeah, just a few changes. So I'm picking up this podcast. I previously hosted Tales from the Kentucky Room, which is our history-based podcast, and I enjoyed it very, very much.
Did amazing.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And now we're just turning our attention to this podcast. It's a little more in line with what I'm currently doing at the library as collection services manager. So it just seemed like a better fit.
It just made sense.
It just made sense, yeah. And then the other podcast, of course, is going to be taken over by our awesome staff here in the Kentucky Room and Central Library staff. So make sure that you stay tuned for more to come from both podcasts.
Hope you enjoy them.
Good day, everyone. Our featured guest is one of our own staff, Laurel McKinley, who authored a series titled The Echoes Trilogy. Echoes on the Wind is the first one. Echoes in Ice and Echoes of Fire are her second and third. Laurel grew up in a small central Kentucky town where she spent most of her time reading, writing her own stories, and watching University of Kentucky basketball games. After graduating from Midway College with a BA in English, she attended Spalding University's Masters of Fine Arts and Creative Writing program. She began her work at the Lexington Public Library in 2023, and we are so happy to have her on the podcast. Hi, Laurel. Welcome to the podcast. We're so excited to have you.
Thank you for having me.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background. Have you been in Kentucky all your life?
Yes, I have lived in Kentucky my entire life. I don't think I've ever lived more than 30 miles outside of Lexington. So yeah, lucky to be able to be part of the bluegrass, but I'm also lucky enough that I've been able to travel a bit. Not as much as I'd like, but a bit.
Travel is always fun.
Yes.
So when did you start writing? What kind of motivated you to go down this path?
I really don't remember a time when I wasn't writing. My kids, they've always seen me write. And when I was a little girl, I used to, before I could even write, before I could even make letters, I would scribble on paper and take it to my grandparents and say, "Do you want to read the story I wrote?" And my grandmother used to say, "How about you read it to me?" Because she was smart enough to know that there was a story, but she wasn't figuring out those scribbles. So, yeah.
That reminds me a little bit of what my daughter's currently doing. She just loves to practice her letters and stuff. So that's awesome. So when you are writing, what genre do you prefer writing in?
I almost exclusively write fantasy of some sort. I have played with the different subgenres of fantasy, but I love fantasy. I like that fantasy gives you the chance to do anything, go anywhere, even to places that aren't real. Maybe especially to places that aren't real.
It is a big genre now. I think that's what
is.
people is drawing people in, is because it is so flexible and it can pull anybody in, whatever genre you enjoy reading. I think
Right.
fantasy is,
And it can be an escape from the harshness of reality, which is always nice to have.
of course, and that's why people read, is to escape. So it's a sort of a escapism. So you write fantasy. You have already released a trilogy called the Echoes Trilogy. So tell us a little bit about the writing process for that particular series.
I started that one before I went to grad school. I went to grad school in Louisville in the Spalding's Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing program. And so before I ever attended that, I started writing Echoes. And it's a young adult, so it's very much a coming of age. And it's kind of a story that had been in the back of my head for a long time. I really started it to kind of deal with the idea of identity and as a teenager, you're always dealing with identity in some way or another, but also identity in if you don't know who your family is, how do you know who you are? And I know it's something that a lot of kids who are adopted have to figure out, but it was personal for me as well because my parents were killed when I was a little girl. And so I was raised by my grandparents. And I didn't know my parents. So I was sort of like, well, if I don't know them, how can I even know me? And I wrote it trying to figure that out. And the funny thing was I wrote it when I was in my late 30s and early 40s. And you would think by that time you would have some sense of your own identity, but, it changes.
It takes a while sometimes.
And it does. It changes at various points in your life.
Yeah. And so your Echoes trilogy is based on a character named Elizabeth Sawyer, who is, as you said, orphaned at a very young age, and then comes to find out that her life isn't what she thinks it is. You already did, but give us a little bit deeper background on how this character came about, and how long did it take you to write the whole trilogy?
I started the trilogy, the first one came out in 2013, but I started writing it probably in 2007, 2008, somewhere in there. And the writing didn't take as long, but it took a lot longer before it was actually published. And then the second one took another 2 years. The third one took a little bit longer than that, but I wrote another book in there too.
So you were doing juggling multiple projects.
I was.
Yeah.
And
how was Elizabeth
she
inspired?
The big defining incident in her childhood was similar and yet very different to mine. The age was similar in that we were both toddlers when our parents were gone. I very specifically set out to write in a genre where I could give her something that I couldn't have. I wanted to give her the opportunity to know her parents. And writing in fantasy and sort of paranormal, you get to play with things like that. So she got to know her parents in different ways than I was ever going to be able to. So that was fun.
Yeah, good. What books and authors inspire you? What do you read in order to get the juices flowing?
I read everything. And my library list that I have checked out right now would definitely show that. But mostly when I was little, I grew up reading the first series that I remember reading over and over and over again was C.S. Lewis' Chronicles of Narnia. My grandfather introduced me to that one and The Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit first, but then The Lord of the Rings. Later, as an adult, I guess in my 20s, I found Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time fantasy series, which is 14 books and a prequel. And they're bricks. I mean, those are massive books.
Yeah, they are.
So very immersive, epic fantasy. And that's probably what I read most for myself. But I read everything. I read romance. I read mystery. I read anything.
And you are a staff member here at the Lexington Public Library. We're very lucky to have you.
Thank you.
Does your work in the library sometimes, does it work in your favor or does it hinder your work sometimes?
It's always been a plus for me working in libraries. What I do now, I get to see so many books that are coming in and see what's popular, what are people reading right now, and that's really cool for me as a writer. And also, it's just really inspiring to be around books and words and all of that all of the time. So,
Of course it is. And finally, last question. What are you working on currently?
I'm currently working on some adult books. Again, it's still fantasy. It's going to be under my pen name, which is LJ Mack. And I have been working on a big epic fantasy story of my own. The first book is tentatively called Resonance of Flame. This one is huge. It's multi-books, political, dragons, family dramas, the whole 9 yards. And that one's really big and really scary because I'm not sure I'm writer enough to handle it yet. But, you've got to do things that scare you or else what's the point?
Exactly.
The other thing, I've been working on a secret project for the last month, and it's a romantasy.
Nice.
I've never written romance because I'm not good at happily ever after. I'm not good at I don't know if I believe in true love enough to write romance.
No.
That's always been the joke with my romance writer friends. But this is a romantasy. I have it all figured out and have begun writing it, and it's going to be called Fade Away, and it should be out by the end of January.
Oh my goodness.
Which is really scary.
That's exciting. I work with her and I didn't even know this.
It's secret. Super, super secret.
Well, we'll be very excited to see that coming out soon. So we'll keep an eye out. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. We really enjoyed talking to you.
It was fun.
And good luck with all your future endeavors.
Thank you so much.
So, Erin, some of the perks of the job
Yes.
is that we get advanced readers copies of some books. Last month, I received a box from our vendor, which is always fun to go through.
Absolutely. That's what I miss about being in the building is actually getting to see the book.
What's coming
out. So
out.
I'm very excited that you have brought a nice selection today.
Yeah. So I picked out just a few that I thought are worth keeping an eye on that are coming out early next year. So we're recording this in December. The first one that caught my eye is actually the fourth book in a series called Her Majesty the Queen Investigates.
Oh.
So it's Elizabeth II. Is involved with solving a bunch of murders. In this book, it's called A Death in Diamonds. And this is the fourth. The first one was called The Windsor Knot. The second one, All the Queen's Men. And the third one is Murder Most Royal. So if you've already started reading the series, the fourth one is coming out in January of 2025. So basically, it's a book about Queen Elizabeth II, and she's kind of, finding her way post-war Europe. In this particular book, she is trying to solve a murder of two bodies were found in Chelsea, England, of course. And so it's very intriguing. If you like kind of like those cozy mystery type books, but a little like elevated, kind of like Rhys Bowen or Jacqueline Winspear, this book is for you.
Do you think it could stand alone like some cozy series can?
It can. I think it can. Yeah, I think it can. There is some reference to the first few books, but this one is you can read it. Start out reading it if you haven't read the other three. But you will miss out on the kind of like the essence of Elizabeth II, like her character as
and she's a young woman.
Yes, younger, the younger version of Elizabeth when she first takes power. So,
can you tell if they took any kind of cue of her personality from The Crown?
I'm not sure because this. I don't know when this author started. Yeah, it's definitely like I'm sure it takes a little bit of her character, an inspiration from of course the history. There is some like accurate historical references, but of course a lot of fictionalized.
Yes,
very, very. I mean, like
imagine the fictional really out there solving. Murders.
I mean the fictional freedom that this author takes is pretty confounding, but there are some accurate historical references definitely in their effect on the whole murder in this story. But it is fascinating, and I love fictionalized history. That's totally my jam. So it was fun. It was fun
great.
reading it. Yeah. The second one that caught my eye is called The In-Between Bookstore.
Oh.
Anything with a title book or librarian, of course, is always
going to catch your eye.
Is going to catch my eye. And so this is by Edward Underhill, and some people might know him from his YA novels.
Okay.
So this one is his first adult book. It's kind of like in that fantasy LGBTQ realm, a little bit of time travel. And so his first books are always The Almost and This Day Changes Everything. And those are like maybe like teen level books. A read-alike of this one is called The Last Hour Between Worlds by Melissa Caruso. But this book in particular, the In-Between Bookstore, this is the back of the book. What it reads is, when Darby left Oak Falls for college in New York City, all he wanted was to get as far away as possible, find a community where he could start fresh, and finally forget about his childhood best friend, Michael, and just how painfully their friendship ended. And it's a whimsical and healing novel about a trans man in New York. He's about almost 30. Okay. He's laid off. He's broke. Has to move back to his small town in Illinois. So that's his hometown. He walks into a bookstore that he worked in while he was in high school. And then there he slips through time to come face to face with his pre-transition teenage self and gets to know him more. So it's fascinating.
So this next one's given me Master and Commander style
Yes.
vibes.
Yeah, this one
Looking
is a
very cool.
nonfiction. It's by Russell Shorto, who is a journalist and historian. He has written other books, dealing with like the beginning of the United States, particularly New York City. And he's written a book called Amsterdam, A History of the World's Most Liberal City. But this book is called Taking Manhattan, and it tells the story of the birth of New York City as the center of capitalism and pluralism. So it is nonfiction. If you like the writing of like Eric Larson, if you like nonfiction that reads like fiction, this one is definitely a good one to read. I did read most of it, and it's fascinating. It really like delves into the indigenous people, and how, the invasion of multiple nations came and kind of changed the whole landscape of what we now know as New York City. It's
And I
really
have
good.
to ask, is Alexander Hamilton in it?
No, it begins like a little before even that. So very fascinating. And lastly, this book I actually read all the way through because it was really just good.
I can, the cover, the title.
Exactly.
I can see, yes.
Again, The Quiet Librarian.
Yes.
How stereotypical of us.
Tell me about it.
Okay, so this is by Alan Eskins or Eskins. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. It's either Eskins or Eskins. But he wrote The Life We Bury, which is a very well-known like thriller. And this one is also a thriller, but I guess you can also like label it as a literary fiction just because of his writing is really descriptive. Like once you start reading it, it's really hard to put down. It's set in both, like it starts out in Minneapolis and then moves in it kind of like a dual timeline. So between like the present time in Minneapolis and then it takes you back to war-torn Bosnia. And this book is actually inspired by the Bosniak refugees in Minneapolis. Let me read you guys the back of the book and you'll see why it's so fascinating. So this book is about Hannah Babich, and she's a quiet middle-aged librarian in Minnesota, and she wants nothing more than to be left alone. But when a detective arrives with the news that her best friend has been murdered, Hannah knows that something evil has come for her, a dark remnant of the past she and her friend had shared. 30 years before, Hannah was someone else, Nura Divjak, a teenager growing up in the mountains of war-torn Bosnia until Serbian soldiers arrived to slaughter her entire family before her eyes. The events of that day thrust Nura into the war, leading her to join a band of militia fighters where she became not only a fierce warrior but a legend. The deadly night Mora, but a shattering final act forced Nora to flee to the United States with a bounty on her head. Now someone is hunting Hannah, and her friend has paid the price, leaving her 8-year-old grandson in Hannah's care. To protect the child without revealing her secret, Hannah must again become the Night Mora and hope she can find the killer before the past comes for them too. And so this story kind of takes on, the themes of as normal people, there's trying to get by and how what happens in war can change you as a person.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
It's really good. I really enjoyed Eskin's writing. So if you liked his first one, The Life We Bury, I think you're going to love this one even more.
Well, thank you for bringing those new titles. I'm really excited to see them come out and hope you guys enjoy them if you check them out.
Yep.
So I don't know if many of you know this, but next year is Lexington's 250th anniversary.
Yep. That's
So
right. Happy birthday, Lexington.
Yes, happy birthday, Lexington. So there is a year-long program partnership with the library and the city and other organizations around the city to celebrate this. So we want to talk about what's happening in January on the library side of things.
Yes. So the city, in celebration of the 250th birthday of Lexington, has themed each month of next year. So January is going to be the Health and Wellness Month, and we are working with other organizations like the YMCA, like CHI Health, et cetera, to, help, move along the programming around the city. So at the library, there are going to be a few programs next month in January. So Erin, tell us a little bit about what's going on.
Coming up, Senior Social Hour at Tate's Creek Branch, and the theme this month is What is 3D Printing? So you can join other seniors in a very relaxed setting to socialize and learn some new activities and some new technologies.
Awesome. And this is strictly for seniors?
Yes, strictly for
Awesome.
seniors. And that's at 10 in the morning on Thursday, January 16th. And then we've got some chair yoga, which is always very popular. It's at Beaumont Branch. And that's on Saturday, January 18th at 11 in the morning. And there's registration for this one. We're going to join a local yoga instructor for some free chair yoga.
Nice.
And it's aimed at beginners, but any level is welcome.
Yeah. So this is like a very beginner friendly.
Yes.
And nice on the joints.
Yes. Chair yoga is always great for the joints. And then Let's Run Lexington is on that same day at 3 in the afternoon at Beaumont Branch on January 18th. And it's to learn about different running clubs and groups in Lexington, popular routes and events, and tips for getting started so that you can run healthily.
Nice. I'm fascinated with this one. I wouldn't consider myself a runner, but maybe walkers could
Yes.
join. Walking works too.
Yes.
Well, that looks like exciting programming for January. Look forward to that. And now, each month is going to have a different theme, so keep an eye out on our events page, and we'll update those events
And there will
as
be
we get closer to
a
the time.
landing page as we launch in January that lists the upcoming events, some other events around the city, but also a curated list of some of our podcasts, walking tours, and digital archive materials that you can look at to see more about Lexington's history.
Yes, that sounds like exciting stuff happening for next year. And we just want to wish everybody a happy new year. Exciting stuff coming this year from the library. Keep an eye out on our events page. Like I said before, there's going to be much more in terms of author visits and programming. So we can't wait for you guys to join in on the fun. Thank you for tuning in to Turning the Page. If you enjoyed listening, there will be more to come. So please give us a follow so that you don't miss the next episode.
We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts.